All right. So who's in the audience today? Put it in the chat, your first name and what city you're Zooming from today. We'd love to know who's here. What do you see in the chat, Joyce?
I see. We have Fresno, Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Thousand Oaks, Ventura, my goodness, Long Beach, they're rolling in, Sunnyvale, California, Minneapolis, Culver City, Mountain View. Oh my goodness, and people are still coming in. Right now we have 112 people, San Jose coming in, Concord. Oh my goodness, take it away, Marla. There's so many people here, and I'm so happy to see all of you.
All right, so we have a trivia question. Coffee has a wild and complex history, and governments and religious leaders have tried to ban coffee. Is that true or false? Give everyone a chance to answer that. What do you see in the chat, Joyce? Has anyone answered the question?
Oh, yes, the truth is coming out. There's so many truths that are saying true, 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 true. Couple of falses, but mostly true. What do you say? What is the answer?
Well, the correct answer is true. In 1511, leaders in Mecca believed it stimulated radical thinking and they outlawed the drink. Some 16th century Italian clergymen also tried to ban coffee because they believed it to be satanic. I think people who don't get their coffee can act that way. However, Pope Clement VII loved coffee so much that he lifted the ban and had coffee baptized in 1600. Even as recently as the 18th century, the Swedish government made both coffee and coffee paraphernalia, including cups and dishes, illegal for its supposed ties to rebellious sentiment. So that's a fun fact. But how do you like your coffee, Joyce?
You know, that's a real good question. When I was growing up, my grandmother used to have give me what's called coffee water. Anybody heard of coffee water? Used to give me coffee water. But for right now, at this time, I'm a tea drinker, but I still will go and try that coffee water just to honor my grandmother. Back to you, Marla.
Well, thanks everyone for introducing yourself and answering our trivia questions. Right now, we have a poll question for you to answer. Wow. So at the moment, it's like 86%. Do you worry that you don't get enough sleep? And the percentage is 86% are saying yes. Then we have one more poll question for you coming up. 13% said no. And we have one more question for you. Do you have trouble sleeping 3 or more nights a week? So we need you to answer that one. Wow. 77%. Oh, it's going up. 78% yes, 22% no. Wow, interesting. I want to thank everyone for participating in the poll. So now we are delighted to have all of you join us today and hope you have your coffee, tea, or other lovely beverage with you. We are excited to share with you a conversation on getting a better night's sleep as we age. And I am so looking forward to hearing this information because sleep is something that I struggle with and many people that I know struggle with. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker from Stanford University School of Medicine, Dr. Erin Cassidy-Eagle. She is a clinical professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences. Dr. Cassidy-Eagle specializes in the treatment of mental health disorders in adults and older adults. She has practiced as a clinical psychologist for more than 20 years and has a special interest in sleep cognition and mental health of older adults. And per our tradition, to add some spice to our introductions, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle shared with us some fun facts about sleep. First of all, when you've slept poorly, your tolerance for pain goes down. Also, 1 in 4 married couples sleep in separate beds. Humans spend a third of their life sleeping. Cats spend 2/3 of their life asleep. That's no surprise. And your flu vaccine is less effective if you have slept poorly the night before. So again, welcome, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle.
Thank you so much. It's one of my favorite topics to discuss, so I'm happy to be here with you all this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. Okay, tell me, how does that look? Can you guys see a full screen of the slide?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I had to add the cat in there for my daughter, but but it also looked just so happy and asleep. All right. Let's see. So what I'm going to talk about today is kind of why sleep's important. I think we all know it is, but I think, just to kind of cover some of the research, and when, your sleep problems, there's a whole range of normal sleep. So when do you know when you should seek help or just get a further evaluation? I'll talk a little bit about changes in sleep with age. And then different strategies. I'm going to focus heavily on strategies because I did get some good questions and things people wanted to discuss ahead of time. So I kind of switched things up and I'm going to focus a lot on just things people try and things that people find useful. I'm also happy to take questions too as we go along here. So Marla, please interrupt me if there's some burning questions, and I'll also try to pause occasionally too. Okay. So I think a lot of us won't be surprised that, sleep is associated with a lot of different health parameters, everything from, cardiovascular disease, cholesterol levels, diabetes. Some of the ones that, I find particularly interesting are even with weight gain. If you have disrupted sleep, your hormones that are responsible for telling you you're full and your hormones that are responsible for telling you that your stomach's empty and you better start eating, they're both impaired with poor sleep. So we can sort of link weight gain with poor sleep. And I think for a lot of people, that's just helpful to know, how the effect it has, and also just your immune response. So like in the trivia question, if you've had poor sleep, the several days leading up to getting a flu shot, you actually develop 50% of the antibodies that you would if you had good sleep. And I think that in a year of lots of vaccines and discussions about our health, it really shows you how well it's connected and how important good sleep is. So how do you know if your problems sleeping are to a point where you need to talk to a doctor or a provider? Just a little bit on what normal sleep is. I mean, normally probably 7 to 9 hours. There's a range. I really only start to worry about people when they get less than 6 hours of sleep. But we're also looking at the total time across a 24-hour day. And I think when you look at people who nap, whether it's unplanned or planned, that it's important to sort of understand how much sleep they're getting across a 24-hour period. Solid sleep does make you feel better than broken up sleep. So if someone's waking up 6 times a night, even if they get a good amount of sleep, that's not going to make you feel too good the next day. Everybody might have 1 to 2 nights a week where something's going on and you have some trouble sleeping, but that's why I asked that poll question. As soon as you get to 3 or more, then there probably are some things we can do to improve your sleep. In terms of falling asleep, it's pretty average to take 15 to 20 minutes. It's actually, if you're someone who lays down and falls asleep within 1 or 2 minutes, that's actually a sign of a problem. So we can talk about that a little bit. And then some folks, we do wake up a little bit during the night, particularly between each sleep cycle. And sometimes you might have to go to the bathroom, but as long as you get back in bed and you fall asleep again pretty easily, that's all kind of in the normal range. All right. So when maybe you do start to worry and you reach out to your doctor or someone else, a lot of times they'll have you keep a record of how your sleep is. So they call them sleep diaries. They might give you some questionnaires. They want to sit and kind of talk to you. What environment do you sleep in? I often say to people, hey, tell me about a typical day. When do you get in bed? What's your sleep like? What's your activity like during the day? Do you fall asleep during the day? Just to kind of know what further assessments might be useful. This is a picture of my husband who loves to sleep, but he especially loved to sleep when we had twins and we were getting no sleep. So I think, one, we all probably know there's those times in our life where we're just more sleep deprived, right? But I think there are other times where there isn't a reason for the kind of chronic problems and we want to try to make things better. But if you find that, let's say you're really sleepy during the day and you're wondering why, because you feel like you're getting good sleep at night, maybe it's even a safety issue that, you're kind of worried about driving, or you're just doing caffeine the whole day just to try to stay awake. That's something to talk about. If you suspect that maybe you have sleep apnea, so signs of that might be your snoring. Daytime sleepiness is a big indicator of that. I will say, if you hit the pillow and you fall asleep within a minute or two, that's also very much associated with sleep apnea because you're just so sleep deprived. Sleep apnea is where you wake up very frequently throughout the night because your body's trying to keep your airway open. Some people also might feel like a creepy, crawly, uncomfortable feelings in their legs. That's something to talk to your doctor about because it could be related to restless legs. Very rarely, but there are some folks that report unusual behavior during sleep, get up and eating, people who act out their dreams in their bed. Those are things that you definitely should talk to someone about. And then there's these traits that are more associated with just a run-of-the-mill insomnia, but can be associated with other disorders as well. And that's trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or maybe you wake up earlier than you want to, or you just don't feel refreshed in the morning. So if you feel like some of the things I talked about, you're noticing, for example, associated with sleep apnea, that's one of the things that definitely increases with age in terms of frequency. That is worth getting checked out. There are some that sometimes they'll do labs, just sort of check your thyroid and other things, as well as maybe ask you questions about your mental health, depression, anxiety, using substances. A lot of things are associated with sleep problems. And I think it's important to try to figure out what's going on with you, because then it gives you and your provider a chance to say, hey, should we treat these at the same time? Is there something else we should really focus on? Sort of what's the order in which you want to address things? Because sometimes if you resolve one, it helps the other, but they need the full picture to kind of figure out what might help you. Often, if they have any questions, and I recommend this with folks, get an overnight sleep study. If you're worried about sleep apnea, if you're worried about any other primary sleep disorder, and you're really drowsy, a sleep study can really give you a lot of information. Now, I will say that if you, let's say you have insomnia, but not sleep apnea, that won't show up on an overnight sleep study, right? So don't feel like you've hit a wall if you do an overnight sleep study and it looks like your sleep is fine, but you're kind of sitting there thinking, hey, my sleep's terrible, I feel terrible. You could still have insomnia. It's just not something that's picked up on an overnight polysomnography. And for those of us in this virtual world that might not want to go in for an overnight sleep study, or you might feel nervous about it, they're actually, a lot of sleep centers now are sending out equipment. You can do it at home. So there is easier ways. And this is someone I work with who's wearing the equipment to kind of show you, there's a nasal cannula, a pulse oximeter, and a belt around your waist to measure your respiration. But, for those of you maybe a little nervous about it, I often say, ask to see if you can get a home screening. The equipment's great nowadays and is very similar results. And so you won't get as detailed of results, but if that's what's holding you back, definitely ask about that. All right, so let's say shifting over to insomnia, how do they diagnose that? Thinking of the poll question here, that for someone to give you this diagnosis, they want you to report 3 or more nights a week you're having trouble sleeping, and that it's been going on for 3 months. And that this difficulty occurs despite an adequate opportunity for sleep. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're a shift worker, or let's say you're helping, care for other people, and you only have like a 4-hour window to sleep, that doesn't mean you have a problem. It means your environment's creating a problem for you because you just don't have enough time. But if you just feel like you have the opportunity, your environment's there, and you're having trouble sleeping, and it's just been going on for a while, that's when, someone like me or someone who is doing similar work could maybe help you out. I always like to help people understand how insomnia develops. I'm sorry, maybe I'm talking a little fast here. I'm going to slow myself down. But this graph, so some folks come in and say, hey, I've had insomnia since I was 18, right? And that's tough. It's tough. I think that those are sometimes the hardest folks to help because it's so entrenched. So I really encourage folks, as soon as you start to have trouble, to maybe reach out and get some help, because the earlier we can change some things, then we can prevent a longer term problem from developing. But here is kind of a visual way to see how things develop. So maybe there are premorbid things. So for example, women are more likely to suffer from insomnia. People who take psychiatric medications or have, depression or anxiety. Some people are just wired a little more energetically, right? Your arousal level, your anxiety, you tend more in that direction, just in general. Those folks are all kind of at higher risk of developing a problem. That doesn't mean others don't, but that puts you at more risk. So then you see the next bar, acute insomnia. There's often a precipitating event that happens. So it could be good or bad. You could be told you're having a grandchild. You could win the lottery. You could lose a friend, right? It could be a lot of different things that then just, get into your brain, get you thinking a lot, or just make you worried or sad. Either way, that it disrupts your sleep for several nights. And then sometimes what we see happen is then people are desperate to get sleep. They want to protect their health. So they start doing things to make sure they get that sleep. That may be you stay in bed longer. You stay in bed longer in the morning. I've had people tell me, okay, I have some tea with, some lemon in it. Other people, want to have some milk with vanilla. Some people take a bath. Some people burn incense. Gosh, it could be a whole range of things. But people start doing these things to try to get back to sleeping well. But unfortunately, setting up all these things to help your sleep sometimes ends up making it a longer term problem, because then it just really complicates things. And it's hard because once you set up all these things, okay, if I have this music and this temperature and this blanket, then what happens when you go to a hotel or you travel? Then you don't have all that stuff. And, it kind of sets you up to sort of really rigidly need these things to sleep. And I think that can create problems as much as, maybe in the short term it helps. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to just take a breath here for a moment. Any questions so far on what I've talked about?
Yeah, I see a couple.
Okay.
And the first one is a question from Nick. He's asking, what's the best OTC sleep aid or the melatonin RAM that is best at his age of 54?
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about melatonin. I think there are actually some ways naturally to boost our melatonin, and that's making sure we suppress too much light coming in near the end of the day. I think melatonin is probably the most straightforward answer in that, naturally we do produce it in our body and sometimes having a little extra boost. I will say the source that you buy it matters because it's not regulated. You want to buy, a higher quality, one that, maybe from a brand you trust, because some of them don't have as much in it as others. I think other sleep aids, some people will say they take Benadryl, they take other sort of combinations. I will say as we get older, those have anticholinergic effects, which means it can affect your thinking. It can give you that kind of hangover effect, maybe make you feel a little slowed and put you at a greater risk of falling if you get up in the middle of the night. So a lot of the other sleep aids, that are often like cold or allergy remedies that some people use, I really advise against those. And I know the physicians I work with do as well. So I think starting with maybe some of the habits, and then melatonin, though, I think is not one that interacts with other medications. It's pretty mild. Anything over 5 milligrams isn't worth it. So taking more melatonin doesn't give you more benefit. If that helps. So, if it says 3 to 5 milligrams, that's probably just about right, because that's kind of the most you're going to benefit from, and just buy a high quality source. That's probably what I'd recommend. But we'll kind of talk through maybe some of the, being a psychologist, I'm going to also talk through some of the behavioral things you could do that might help you feel a little bit more sleepy when you go to bed.
Okay, there's one other one. What about magnesium? Is that good for leg rest, restless legs?
It is. Magnesium, and there actually are food sources of some of these too. So you can take a supplement, but you can also look up different foods that have some of these things. If you think of, I'm thinking magnesium, potassium, they're not only good for, magnesium has kind of a muscle relaxant effect. So it kind of just brings your arousal down. But yeah, if you have leg cramps, make sure you're getting enough magnesium. That's definitely one that's helpful.
Right. We can continue, and then there's a couple of other questions after that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, and when I talk about how often people have insomnia, gosh, you guys, and probably your bias sample, because probably people with sleep problems might have been more likely to sign up to hear this. So maybe that's why we got, 87% of you talking about some sleep problems or worry about your sleep. If you look across the whole population, the whole lifespan, probably 30% of people at any time have symptoms of insomnia, and about 10% meet criteria. I'm guessing in this group, and then you look, as soon as you're over 65, that jumps up to 50%. Like I said, women and people with other medical or psychiatric conditions are even more likely to have sleep problems. But I think it's important because not only does it affect your physical health, but it actually puts you at risk of, for example, insomnia puts you at greater risk of, getting depressed. It also, for example, if you look at someone who's about to deploy, someone in the military, if they have insomnia in the couple weeks leading up to being deployed, they're almost 2.5 times more likely to develop PTSD. So I think it is something to really look at and try to help. And you'll also notice that if you have other medical, psychiatric problems, that it's very commonly a symptom. I often say to folks that, it's one of those things I think we do find easier to talk about. If I say, hey, I'm going to do a class on depression, I got to tell you, no one signs up for that. But when I say, hey, I want to do a class on sleep and kind of talk about what we can do, everyone loves that. So I think it's kind of like that just tells us it's a way in. And I sort of have this running theory that if we can improve your sleep, we might improve a whole bunch of other things, whether it be your emotional health, physical health. And so I think it's an easy thing to do some things about. Okay, so let's talk about what changes as we get older. Certainly people complain more of it. And I don't think it's because you're complainers. I think because people there are more things that set you up to have sleep problems. We do notice that in terms of hypnotics and medications, requests for those increase with age. I think, I'll talk a little bit more about my feelings about medications. But I think that, the AMA and different medical associations in the last couple of years have come out with, that the first line treatment, that we really should be trying some behavioral things, and other strategies before we immediately prescribe someone medication, because it changes the nature of your sleep. And it's really hard to get off the medication. So I think, sometimes people see it as a magic wand, but I think, it doesn't come without risk. So it's something to look at. And then we also notice, just as we get older, sleep apnea, cognitive impairment, other health conditions definitely are specific to over 65 that put us at more risk of sleep problems. In terms of what you might notice overnight, what changes in everybody as we sleep? So sleep is slightly shorter. And by that, I probably only mean 30 to 40 minutes. So if when you were 30, you slept 8 hours, probably when you're 70, it might be more like 7.5. So it's not dramatically less, but it's a little bit less. And that just is true across the board. We do notice that sleep is lighter, so it's easier to be disturbed more frequently throughout the night. So whether that be you have to go to the bathroom, you might be more sensitive to noise, but you might notice that you wake up more frequently during the night. And unfortunately, that really even has a bigger impact on, how refreshed you feel in the morning. And finally, another big one here is less deep sleep. So typically we have stages 1 and 2 that are lighter sleep, and then stage 3, which is deep sleep, and then REM. I will say the lighter sleep and the REM sleep, they're pretty consistent over the course of your life. They hold steady, but the deep sleep really decreases, which, deep sleep that's kind of like, if you think of your sleep being an office, it's when we do all of our filing. It's kind of when we sort out our memories and what we experienced during the day. We do a lot of that during deep sleep. So memory consolidation, memory retention. I will say there is a slight gender difference. It's probably the only thing that I've heard where women do a little bit better than men. So by the time we're 70, we've lost about 80 to 90% of the deep sleep we get. For women, we hold on to just maybe 5% more than men. But I will say, in terms of other disruptors over the course of our life, women usually fare more poorly, whether it be childbirth or hormone changes. Women have a lot more sort of things that hurt their sleep. So this is the one area where women fare a little bit better. But we hold on to a very little amount, but that's why it's important to get good sleep, because we want to get as much of that deep sleep as we have left. We want to get it because it really is important to, just a lot of physical things as well. All right. So thinking about treatments. A second ago, I kind of started to talk about medication. So there have been a lot of studies comparing what I do, which is more of a cognitive behavioral approach to treating insomnia, to medications. I will say, if you look in the first 3 months, they're neck and neck. They do just as well as each other in terms of helping someone sleep. So the medications are an evidence-based treatment. They do help you sleep. But when they look at, let's say, 6 months out, so, how are people sleeping? If they've stopped the medication, their sleep returns to just as bad as it was at baseline. Whereas those who've tried just different behavioral things and found some things that help them get more sleep, they're still maintaining the gains that they got. And there are no sort of drug-drug interactions or side effects, certainly more cost effective. But what I notice is I have a lot of folks come to me on sleeping, hey, I'm taking, 5-10 milligrams of Ambien. I just want to get off of it. And I will say it's one of the medications that is the hardest to get people off of. So if you haven't started taking one, I would love to just put a pitch out there to just be willing to try some of these other things first. There are times where you may be traveling or going through something difficult when, you might look to something short-term to help you sleep, but just know that, it's a big choice to make. Okay. I can kind of go into how I treat it. Maybe I'll do another quick pause. Any other burning questions out there?
Yeah, I have one where this young lady Nishi, she works until 10 o'clock at night, and then she gets home like between 10 and 10:45. So what are ways so she can unwind? The snacking, any ideas? How could she get that rest?
Yeah, no. And that's one of the suggestions I'll come up with here in a minute, is to kind of create that buffer zone so you can kind of relax. Now, I will say, people often feel like, hey, I need to sleep from 10 to 6, or they have it in their head, they need to sleep at a certain time. You know what? You sleep at the time that works for you. I think the only restriction is, if you work, if you volunteer, if you're a caregiver, there might be some things that constrain your schedule. But I think that finding ways to relax, decrease your arousal, whether that be, progressive muscle relaxation, anything that kind of calms their brain. I don't know what she does for work. Maybe she needs to actually read or watch a little TV to get her mind kind of discharged. I will say light has a huge effect on our sleep. So we produce natural melatonin. That's our hormone that gets us sleepy. If you are exposed to bright light, whether it be on a computer, a phone, TV is a little bit better because it's all about how close is it to your eyes. But let's say she's working under bright lights. One thing she could try in the evening is to do blue light blocking glasses. You can get cheap ones on Amazon, but to try to wear glasses that block the blue light for the last couple hours of the evening, because then her melatonin will start building up, which will help her get sleepy. I think if you have trouble falling asleep because you're really aroused, then you want to be careful in the evening about how much light you expose yourself to, because light will suppress that melatonin. So we want to either block the light or just dim the lights in our house as much as possible the hour or two before we go to bed. So that would be kind of my suggestion.
Great. And then I have just one other quick one. What about a plant-based type of medication, like a herbal product, or any of those good that you think?
I think that I think you want to make sure that, because sometimes because again, they're not monitored, right? Sometimes they have ingredients that could interact with other things. I think I found a few people that say that those work, but I haven't found any sort of consistent report. It's that people feel like it might be more of a placebo effect, but I think because I'd say I would try those before I'd try, a hypnotic. It's worth trying to see if they work for you. And I would, based on the other medications you might take, talk to your doctor about, maybe even bring in a couple that you found and ask if there's any problems or any interactions that could cause you problems before you try those.
Okay, and then one last question. Yeah. You mentioned about older adults get less deep sleep. Yeah. What is a healthy average for older adults who is somebody who is 70 plus?
And it's just sort of a biological change, right? So it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just something that changes as we get older. And they probably just, over 70 get 5 to 10% of what they got at 30. There's nothing at this point that we can do to increase the amount of deep sleep. But I think, I just say trying to ensure that you get as good a quality of sleep. By that, I mean, as solid a sleep as possible can sort of help that. But, nothing's going to probably raise it back up. We just want to make sure we protect the sleep we get, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I will say there are some studies out there where people are trying to do some things, whether it be lighting or other sort of brain stimulation. They're actually trying to figure out how to increase the deep sleep we get as we get older. So I don't know how quickly they'll come up with something good, but there's some pretty amazing people studying it. So, maybe at some point there will be something we can actually do to increase the deep sleep, which would be really exciting.
Hey, and then my last question is, what about these blackout curtains and these
yeah.
blue light glasses and diffusers and sound machines? What about all of that stuff? Is that good?
I think a lot of that's good. I think, okay, I have a slide on specifically that. So if I can tell you to hold tight.
Okay, no problem.
I think a lot of those things are great, especially, if we can customize them for your environment. Okay. So talking about kind of the cognitive behavioral approach, which, there's psychologists that do this, but, I'm part of the training organization that trains people to do this kind of work. I will say more and more, there are more people that do this. And sometimes you can sign up for a class. But really it looks at this cycle. Often we have something that disrupts our sleep, whether it be our physical health, something going on socially. And then we start to worry about our sleep, which is why I asked that. And a lot of us worry about our sleep. I do sleep and I worry about my sleep sometimes. And you sometimes feel like the thought is, I can't make myself get more sleep. Like it kind of makes you anxious to feel like you can't control it. You can't force yourself asleep, right? And so you can see where that can contribute to feeling anxious and worried about it. And then you might start changing your behaviors to get more sleep, staying in bed longer. Maybe you get up at dramatically different times because you think, if I'm asleep, I'm not going to wake up. I just want to get as much as I can. And maybe you're less active because you're exhausted during the day. And you can see that just kind of, it's a vicious cycle. Kind of all of them make each other worse. And so what I say to people is, hey, I can't maybe take away what happened in your life or reach in and fix your physical health. And I can't reach in and make someone not depressed, at least not instantly. So that's why the behavioral treatments really focus on the other two bubbles. So how do you think about sleep? How do you address the worries? And then what do you do? What can you do that will help bring on some more sleep? So some of the initial things that I clear with people. So these are kind of, when I say sleep hygiene, I often mean those things that when you're looking in a magazine or, that says, hey, how to get good sleep. These are the kinds of things they list. And it's not that they're not helpful. I think any of these things can make your sleep bad. But sometimes what my caveat is, sometimes just fixing these aren't enough, right? But let me start with these because I think that these are healthy sleep behaviors that do help your sleep and can really cause problems. So I think regular exercise, but not like right before you go to bed, right? Because that gets you all riled up. Making sure your bedroom's comfortable and free from light. So what we were talking about. So let's say you have street lights. Let's say you're in the hospital, someplace where there's a lot of light. That's going to suppress your melatonin. So I've had people ask me about sleep masks or blackout curtains. I don't like something on my face at night, so I go with the curtains. So if you live somewhere or your room is somewhere where there is a lot of light, I think anything you can do. So the bathroom, maybe use the bathroom in the middle of the night. Great to get like a night light so you can see and not fall, but not have that really bright overhead light on. Also, a comfortable temperature. I think sometimes people believe that they want to be warm. They want to take a warm bath or have their room at a warm temperature to fall asleep, when actually our bodies want to cool as we go to sleep. So what we notice is rooms that are about, even 67 degrees, 68 degrees, that's an ideal temperature for sleep. You'll notice that your body cools off when you initially fall asleep. And then at the midpoint in the night, your body starts to heat back up. And actually, it's that increasing core body temperature that wakes you up in the morning. So I think that helps you kind of see where making, even if you take a hot bath, then your body has the ability to sort of come down from that. And it's that cooling effect that really brings on sleep. I say eat regular meals. Just how you digest really can impact sleep, but don't go to bed starving, right? So sometimes a little protein snack. I've had people, especially low protein snack, maybe combined with a little carb, not just carbs because you'll run through those too quickly, but something, just a small snack. If people find they wake up because they're hungry, have a small snack before bed. I think too, as we get older, and I'll raise my hand on this one, you want to sort of cut down the liquids for the couple hours before bed, because I think, because we're sleeping a little bit lighter, it's just that can really get you up a lot in the middle of the night. So it's just an easy thing to change. Caffeine products, tea and coffee. I think in the morning, I'm a big believer. If you find that you're really awake when you get into bed, look out for that caffeine. And there are things like chocolate that have caffeine that we don't think about that you might be eating in the evening that could be actually, if you're sensitive to it, that can keep you awake. Alcohol, that's another big one. So I think, for folks that are, regularly or semi-regularly drink alcohol, the earlier you can in the evening, have it not right, the sort of the myth of a nightcap is just that, it's a myth. So unfortunately, alcohol, if you drink it right before you go to bed, you will find that helps you fall asleep, but it's actually activating. So as your body metabolizes it, it wakes you up in the middle of the night. So, you know, that's when you wake up and you feel tired, but you know, you can't get back to sleep. Sometimes alcohol is a culprit in that, just by the way your body digests it. So you don't want it close to when you go to sleep. And then smoking, there's a lot less of that nowadays, but some people still smoke, and it's a stimulant. So if you find you wake up in the middle of the night and smoke, that will also keep you awake a little bit longer. Okay. So into sort of the stuff I feel like has the most benefit, we're thinking about healthy behaviors. I will say that they can be hard to do. They're not always things people want to do, but they're the things that help your sleep the most. So caveat, if you don't really have trouble, you don't get to wake up in the middle of the night, then don't worry as much about these things. But if you're waking up in the middle of the night, or you're spending a couple hours awake in the middle of the night, consider trying some of this. So one key thing is get up at the same time every day. For those that work, you know, I will say, you know, if you get up at 6 during the week and you get up at 9 on the weekends, what that does is it actually gives you jet lag. You know, that feeling you have when you have jet lag, that if you change your rise time that much, that's how your body's going to feel. So it actually kind of works against you. Now, you know, I want people to catch up if they're sleep deprived, but, you know, if you can aim to, you know, figure out, the key thing is figure out how much are you sleeping at night, and try to focus on being in bed for about that amount of time. So if you know you can get up at 7 every day and you're probably getting between 7 and 8 hours, you know, then try to stay up till 11. You can see where if, you know, let's say you're sleeping, you know, I've had people come in that say, hey, I get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, I go to bed at 10, you know, and then I get enough sleep. The problem with that is then you're in bed for 10 hours. And if you're really only sleeping maybe 7, it just guarantees that you're going to be awake for 3 hours in the middle of the night, which probably means your sleep is really disrupted. And so as much as you feel like you're doing something to get more sleep, you end up sort of having all these holes in the middle of the night. I always think of it like pizza dough. You know, if you've ever rolled out pizza dough and you start to get some holes, and then if you keep rolling it out, you're going to get more holes. That's kind of like your sleep. And so kind of what you need to do is squish that dough back together and be in bed for a shorter period of time. But if you tell me, hey, I'm in bed for 6.5 hours and I sleep solidly, or you tell me, hey, I'm in bed for 10 hours, but I only sleep 7, I'd rather you do the 6.5, because even though it's a little bit less sleep overall, it's more solid sleep. So you're getting those normal sleep cycles. And I promise you, you're actually going to feel better. It's just, I think that it's hard for people to get out of bed sometimes in the morning, right? So something else. So let's say you wake up in the middle of the night and it's been more than 20 minutes. I don't want you to watch the clock, because I think what happens when we look over at the clock is we all start doing math. How much time do I have left, right? And I think that gets us into trouble. So if you were awake in the middle of the night and you kind of feel like, hey, you know, I'm not going to fall back asleep anytime soon, I think it can be helpful to get out of bed. And if it's cold, have a chair next to your bed with a blanket, or have one in the next room. It can be a comfortable spot where maybe you look through a magazine. Maybe you read something boring. You don't want to use that time to do anything really productive. You don't want to clean something, organize something. Maybe you knit, maybe you, so, you know, you can do some anything for you that's not stimulating. And then as soon as you kind of start to feel drowsy again, get back into bed. Okay, a note about naps. I am pro nap. If you're having a lot of trouble sleeping at night, then I think you do want to try to avoid taking naps during the day. And that's both planned and unplanned naps. You know, there are those times where people in the evening, you know, not off watching the TV, right? A lot of us do it. And I think we want to avoid that, because what that does is it diminishes your drive, your sleep pressure, as we call it. So then you can be falling asleep on the couch, and then you get into bed and you're wide awake and you think, what happened? I was just falling asleep, right? But it's you want to try to either go to bed earlier, you know, as soon as you're sleepy, or do things to not fall asleep at unintended times. So as miserable as it sounds, maybe get up and walk around the room a little, or put a cold washcloth on the back of your neck. But you want to really know when you're going to sleep during the day. If you do want to take a nap, sometime mid-afternoon is a great time. Try to keep it 45 minutes or less. Shorter naps will make you feel a little bit better. And if you're a napper, there's no problem with that. Schedule it, get into bed, do it in the same place every day. I think just having some control over it is what's helpful. And then before you get into bed, have that buffer zone where you can kind of relax and sort of just calm down and have an end to your day. TV is one thing folks ask me about a lot. Some people really like to fall asleep to the TV. I will say that, TV can provide kind of white noise. And I will say it also has a little less of that white light, the blue light that keeps you, that suppresses melatonin because it's further away from your eyes. But the downside is it does have some light and some noise. And so that can keep you in a lighter sleep. It can also, sort of suppress melatonin. So your body isn't doing the work to stay asleep. So there's upsides and downsides. If you are somebody who likes to fall asleep with the TV, see if you can figure out how to set a timer so that the TV might run, but then it shuts off after 45 minutes. Just because having it running all night while you're sleeping can actually kind of keep your brain engaged in a way that isn't helpful. All right. Let's see. Okay, some of the other questions I got, are weighted blankets helpful? I think, and I've noticed for especially folks that have sort of some anxiety, maybe they do suffer from insomnia. We notice in younger folks, people who have autism, that weighted blankets actually kind of have that swaddling, soothing effect. Now for other folks, they don't want stuff on them. They get hot while they sleep. They don't like something like that. But I think for certain people, weighted blankets are great. I think journaling. So let's say you're somebody that has an active mind, you're worrying a lot about stuff. Sometimes there's some things called constructive worry, and I'm happy to send resources for that. But there's ways to how can you work out some of these things you're worried about during the day as opposed to having them at night? If it's environmental problems, we talked about masks, blackout curtains, any way to decrease the light is helpful. Sometimes people get a sound machine. I have one. Any type of noise that helps you. There's white noise, pink noise. Some people, if you can look at the research, prefer pink noise, which varies a little bit more than white noise, but both work. Nature sounds, as long as they're fairly low key. I like waves because it varies a little, but it's pretty consistent. But some people find, especially if there's other noise in your environment, you live in neighborhood noise, maybe you're sleeping in a hotel, you can even pull up wave noises on your phone, if that kind of helps you, or have a travel sort of machine. But I think people do find those useful. And then kind of the last things I was going to talk about, and looks like it's working out on timing here. If you have medical problems, so let's say you're undergoing cancer treatment, let's say you have horrible pain or you're recovering from surgery, I think you want to do whatever keeps you safe. So that maybe instead of getting out of bed if you're not sleeping, if you're resting, it might be you stay in bed, right? You don't want to cut out on your rest. So I think, or if you're at risk of falling because, you're starting a new medication, I think safety is always priority, right? And as far as napping, sometimes, I think for me, it's planned versus unplanned. Try to shift it to planned as much as possible, and make sure that you have enough that fulfills you during the day. Sometimes I have people come to me and they're really anxious, and the hard part is they don't have stuff that's engaging them, that they feel like is giving them sort of a sense of purpose or enjoyment during the day. So I think it is helpful to look at, what are you doing during the day? That does affect your sleep at night. And then lastly, people talk a lot about different medications, and then just changes with age too, that cause us to have to use the restroom more during the night. So I think talking to your doctor about any medications that could interfere with sleep, seeing if you can take those in the morning instead of the evening. and then with the bathroom, decreasing fluids in the, later in the evening. But I also find that if people make sure they're kind of staying in bed for a shorter period of time and they can kind of improve the quality of their sleep, sometimes they sleep deeply enough that they don't wake up as much to void. That actually, I had somebody a couple months ago, was getting up 7 times a night, and he got it down to 3 or 4. Now that still is a lot and it's still not perfect, but I think, that sometimes just any improvement can affect our quality of life. Sometimes it's just simply talking to your doctor about that stuff. And then finally, I have just some resources. There are some free mobile apps if you want to try to make some of these changes on your own. Some of them cost money, but they're a lot. Like the VA has lots of, they call them coach, like CBTI coach. God, they have a mindfulness coach. The VA has created lots of apps, and they're actually all freely available because it was federal funds that created them. And so they have relaxation routines. They have ways to track your sleep. I love this app. So that's something free that you can do if you're trying to make some of these behavioral changes over time. And then you can see there's some you can pay for, but there's relaxation apps too, meditation apps. And then, which, I'm happy to, we can all send out to all you folks. And then these are some books that I've had patients also say that they really like if they kind of want to try to do some of this on their own, or they can't get in to see somebody quickly enough, which definitely can happen. And that's really it. I'm going to shut up now and see if there's questions and things that people might be interested in hearing more about.
A really quick one, because I know we're on time. What about bed pillows? Any recommendations for a good pillow?
Gosh, yeah, I think bed pillows matter. I think, it's probably custom to, some people get really hot, so they want a pillow that's a little cooler. I went through several pillows, so I think it's probably just trying a few, but I don't know. Everybody's a little different, so it's kind of hard to recommend just one. Pillows have ironically become political too recently, yeah, I think depending on, like, if you have spine issues or neck issues, gosh, make sure you have the support. I use a Body Buddy pillow, those long, they look like a long hot dog, so that if you're a side sleeper, those can be great just to keep, your knees around it, to keep your spine aligned. So if you have musculoskeletal things, I think pillows are, essential, to have lots of them and have the ones that really you like.
So thank you so very much. There's several more questions in there, but we'll make sure that you get those questions so you can answer them. I'm going to take it right back over to Marla. Take it away, Marla.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle, for the information that you shared with us. Has been very helpful. But before we close out, we'd like to take a quick pulse poll. Take a quick pulse with a poll. So if everyone would answer the poll. So the questions are, which things will you try to help you get a better night's sleep? Limit my electronics, stick to a sleep routine, set up my bedroom, sleeping space differently, monitor what I eat, drink before bedtime, be careful about napping and when to nap, talk with my doctor or other. And looks like most everyone is saying they're going to stick to a sleep routine and schedule. That's the most popular, and monitor what I eat and drink before bedtime. So thank you to our guest, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle. Thank you for participating today. We hope you feel encouraged and inspired to explore these ways to get a better night's sleep. Thank you to our guest, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle, our moderator, Joyce Howard, our volunteer production crew, Christy Roadhurst and Jacqueline Cole, our tech specialist, Vince King, our awesome AARP staff, and all of you for participating. Our next Coffee and Tea Tuesday monthly meeting is Tuesday, October 12th at 9 a.m. Our guest will be Deputy Patty Sanchez, and our topic is crime prevention and community, I beg your pardon, relation. So if you have questions or suggestions for our next coffee and tea, you can contact Atisha Jones, and there is her email. But thank you again, Dr. Cassidy-Eagle.
My pleasure. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
So thank you all for joining us today, and this concludes our program. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.